Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for Vertica Unify 2021. Today's breakout session is entitled Vertica Advisor, Evaluate and Improve the Health of Your Vertica Cluster. I'm Jeff Healy. I lead marketing at Vertica, and I'll be your host for this breakout session. Joining me today are Srirang Kamat, Johnny Him, and Narendra Prabhu from the Vertica Customer Success team. Before we begin, I encourage you to submit questions during the virtual session. You don't have to wait, just enter your questions into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We'll answer as many questions as possible during that time. Any questions that we don't address, we'll do our best to answer offline. Alternatively, visit the Virtual Developer Lounge to ask additional questions and continue the conversation with our engineers and product experts after the session. And yes, this virtual session is being recorded. Will be available to view on demand this week. We'll send you a notification as soon as it's ready. Please stick around to get the code to gain points to participate in our Analyze to Win competition and win prizes. Now let's get started. Over to you, Srirang.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vertica Unify. In today's session, we're going to talk about how we are using Vertica platform for analytics. After that, we plan to talk about Vertica Scrutinize tool. This tool has a lot more significance in the context of Vertica Advisor project. Followed by that, we plan to talk about Vertica Advisor report and then end it with a demo of few Vertica Advisor reports to illustrate our point. So let's get started. Our customers, when interacting with support, send a scrutinized file. This star file has metadata from your database, logs, and many other system level information. This data that we collect is securely stored in a Vertica database tagged by the customer name and the time of collection. Along with this data, we also load in this database our interaction with the customers and the defects that we file for our customers. This database today is roughly about 40 terabyte in size and proving to be very valuable from different respects. So to give you a few examples, from the support perspective, having historical snapshots from your database and being able to compare the current behavior, usage, and the configuration with the historical data points is proving to be very valuable when diagnosing and resolving issues. In every version of Vertica, we release tens of features. We use this data from this database to do analysis on the adoption rates and the areas that needs further polish. I'm happy to say that a lot of design decisions when designing features are data driven today, and the data that is being used is the data from this database. You can say that we have started to drink our own champagne. So let's look at the Vertica Advisor report at very high level. Like any other product, Vertica has set of best practices which when followed can really improve the stability and performance of your cluster. But for different reasons, these best practices could be missed. We decided to evaluate the data that we collect against these best practices and generate a report which we call a Vertica Advisor report. My colleague Johnny Him and Narendra Prabhu is going to talk more about this report in the later part of this session. So how can you get your Vertica Advisor report for your database? It's a very simple process. You just need to collect scrutinize, and then once collected, upload the tar file to S3 bucket and your job is done. We will automatically download this scrutinize and upload it to our Vertica database from where reports get generated and mailed to you if you have specified the email address at the time of upload. The next section that I'm going to talk about is a scrutinize tool. The data that is required to generate a report or to diagnose a complex issue comes from different sources spread on different nodes in the cluster. Scrutinize is a single tool that can help you collect all this data and pack it into a single tar file, which you can just send it to us. Scrutinize makes this process very easy and user-friendly. Scrutinize does not collect any of user data. And over the last 1 year, we have made significant enhancement with respect to performance and stability of this tool. Let's look at what information is collected by Scrutinize. Scrutinize collects a lot of host information like sysctl settings and D messages. It collects log files from different kinds of logs like Vertica log admin tool. It also collects the data collector tables, which are also known as DC tables. And for some of new customers out there, DC tables are tabular representation of Vertica logs. And this is mostly for users like us who like to write queries. Along with DC tables, there are information like metadata tables and the design that we collect from your database. Now that you know what is in there, how do you run it? It's a simple script to run and has many different options. Unless directed by a support engineer, we just want you to pass the configurations or the options that are on the screen here. One of the most important option to pass is temp directory. Please make sure that there is sufficient space in this directory, as your collection process can fail because of not having enough space. If you're going to send us scrutinized report for collecting a health check, then you may skip log by passing exclude task. Now that you know how to collect it, the next question is, how do I upload it? Uploading it to a S3 bucket, which is a write-only, is a very simple process. You have two options, a curl command or AWS CLI. The examples of each are in this slide. The curl command has a limitation of 5 GB max size from the AWS side. We want to inform you to not change the name of the scrutinized file because we check for this format before we pull it into our lab. There is also a traditional way to send us a scrutinized file, which is FTP or SFTP. If you plan to send it to us via one of these sites, then you may have to open a support ticket and the support engineer will immediately be able to provide you the scrutinized report for your database. So before I hand it over to Johnny, who is going to talk about this report in a lot more detail, I want to encourage all of you to send us a scrutinized report from your database as frequently as possible. Being able to really understand how Vertica responds to different situations in the field will help us focus our energy in really making good decisions that benefit us and our customers. Over to you, Johnny.
There are 13 categories on the vAdvisor report, and each category has few cards or checks. These categories can be grouped into the following: system configuration settings, Vertica configuration and catalog settings, resource pools, database operations, monitoring, errors, and events. For system configuration settings, one of the things the vAdvisor will do is provide OS configuration settings for all the nodes in the database. We want to make sure that the settings are correct and set according to best practice. How is it useful? For instance, if there's a large cluster of 60 nodes, it is possible that this scheduler or transparent huge page settings can be misconfigured for one or several nodes. The vAdvisor has a card that is called Huge Pages and this scheduler settings, which will list the values of these settings for all the nodes in one single place. For those that are incorrect, it will display the nodes that are not correct and it will provide a recommendation. Another one of these cards is the ulimit and sysctl settings, which also shows the setting for all the nodes in one place. It is important to make sure the settings are set accordingly. If any one node is not configured correctly, it can cause the database to perform poorly, and Vertica can only be as fast as the slowest node. The next group is the configuration settings, which I've also included the schema and projection design categories. In this group, we'll find cards or checks that will provide information about configuration settings of the Vertica database. The Vertica database has many knobs and settings that can be changed to accommodate your workload. So the vAdvisor report will have few cards that will provide a snapshot of the changes made. For instance, there's the non-default config parameter card. This will show the settings with non-default values. It is possible that a setting may have been changed by a support recommendation due to an issue in the previous release. After the upgrade, this issue has been fixed, but the setting is still disabled or modified from default. Typical settings such as max client sessions, merge out intervals, max row size are always changed based on your DB workload. There's another card called spread configuration, where you can find the communication mode that spread is set to, whether it is point-to-point or broadcast. It is important to have this set correctly, as it can cause nodes down or increase network packets if set incorrectly. On the schema and projection categories, you can find information about projection skewness card, tables with auto projections card, tables with unused projections card. All of this will help you manage and optimize the DB so it can perform accordingly. Another section of interest in the vAdvisor report is the resource pools. As you may already know, managing the resource pool is an important aspect of DB administrator. Your Vertica environment will require running a variety of multiple queries at the same time. When running more than one query on the system, the queries share resources. Therefore, each query can take longer to run than it would if it were running by itself. The resource manager helps you prioritize resource usage and handles resources using resource pools. How is this useful? For instance, you can find if query budget of the pools are set up efficiently by checking the resource pool budgets card, which shows what the query budget is for each query when it is started. And it will also show the percent of the memory being used initially. Queries run against resource pools with very small budgets may be planned with conservative resources and can impact query performance. On the other hand, queries that run against resource pools with very large budgets may not need all their allocated resources, which could be waste of resources. Also, you can find how long queries are waiting in the queue by checking the resource queue history card. This card displays the count of queries that spend more than 1 second in the queue by resource pool. Knowing historical data about resource pool queue status can help configure resource pools to reduce queue wait times and improve performance. The last group in the vAdvisor report is database operations, monitoring error and events. The DB administrator has many tasks, and one of them is to monitor the DB day-to-day operations. We've created the vAdvisor so it can help you on this aspect. It is another tool you can add to your arsenal of things to use when managing and monitoring the operations of the Vertica DB. For instance, there's a card that reports the longest running queries. You can grab the transaction ID and statement ID of that query so you can investigate further by drilling down into the execution engine profile of that query. There are other cards where you can look into the memory, CPU, network, and deserialization. This is presented in a nice graph, so you can use this and correlate period of slowness and see how each of the subsystems were performing during that time period. There are other cards such as high percentage of deleted records, requests initiated per node, etc. In the error and events category, which I've grouped into the same group as database operations, there are cards that provide information about different error and events that the DB is recording. These cards are, for example, heartbeat events, which tracks the catalog access and disk access that Vertica sends to each node. Those nodes whose heartbeat is taking longer to respond should be looked into, as they may be the cause of the DB slowness. Database events, which reports the events from query planning and execution with suggestion actions to help optimize performance and cluster health. There is also errors and panics card, spread retransmit card, etc. These are some of the sections and cards the vAdvisor provides. This is a snapshot of what it looks like. Narendran will show in more details with a demo of the vAdvisor report. When you open vAdvisor report with your favorite browser, it displays the home page, which shows the left side navigation listing the different categories, and the right side shows the summary section displaying all the cards under status represented by that icon. If you click on any one item of interest, the resource pool budget, for instance, it will lead you to the corresponding card. For the resource pool budget card, it will show all the pools and its corresponding important columns, such as plan concurrency, max concurrency, execution parallelism, query budget, etc. There is also description, best practice specific to the section on the bottom. There is also a button called View, where it shows you the query that's used to generate this card. Another section is the recommendation based on the different outputs. For instance, for the resource pool budget, it may recommend you change the plan concurrency. How can you get this report? Shiren talked about how you can get a copy earlier. Open a case wizard support or upload the scrutinous file to the S3 bucket, and you will get the report emailed automatically. Future plans. We're constantly improving this report. We have many plans and ideas on how to make this better, but we're open for suggestions and recommendations. One of the things we're looking to improve is provide health score. Another thing is to add predictive analysis with ML model to determine common failure points. We really encourage everyone to obtain a copy of the vAdvisor and get familiarized with it. It gives me so much insight into customers' clusters, and it provides so many data points that I use it daily as one of my favorite tools when troubleshooting customers' issues. I hope you will find it as useful and insightful. Narendra will continue from here and will show a demo of the vAdvisor report.
Thanks, Johnny. In this demo, I'm not only going to show you how to interpret a vAdvisor report, but also share my personal experience on how vAdvisor helped me get up to speed with Vertica within a matter of weeks. Having joined Vertica this spring out of school, understanding Vertica concepts was quite overwhelming for me, let alone diagnosing issues. When I saw an issue, going through the Vertica documentation, writing queries on my database, then comparing results to best practices was just tedious. I thought to myself, it is going to take a long time until I get anywhere close to learning Vertica databases. Enter vAdvisor. I was quickly able to map the concepts that I was reading to real databases. Things started getting crystal clear, and best practices were just a click away. For someone who started with next to none knowledge of Vertica to now being able to diagnose and recommend solutions, I think I've come a long way. Here, I'm going to go through a few real life reports, just like I did at the beginning of my journey, and hope it sheds some light on how helpful this report is. We will take a look at 3 different vAdvisor case studies taken from real life examples. To add to what Johnny mentioned before, the homepage of a vAdvisor displays a summary about the report itself. The top right-hand corner shows the case ID, system tables, and DC tables that were used to generate the report. The footer reveals the account name, database name, and the date the data was captured. The first look at the 12 home cards points to elements that are important from a Vertica aspect and what can make it run optimally. So of all the hosts, schemas, projections, storage, and other data that Vertica relies upon, the ones listed here are the key factors. So just taking one look at the cards in these sections, any starter should get a pretty good idea of what factors to look for in Vertica. Now, basically, there are 2 ways of traversing a vAdvisor report, and it depends on which entry point you take. One is an informative traversal using the side navigation bar, and the other is a diagnostic one by clicking on the action item of each card. When I started as a user with no knowledge of Vertica, I would walk through each of the sections, reading along the summary and the best practices from the side navigation bar. The report has enough information for a new Vertica user to get accustomed to Vertica terminology and understand the key features of their database. Let's do that for this report. We will start by taking a look at system configuration. The system configuration section has information about the host, the machine errors, and system settings. The host specifications card aggregates information about CPU and memory settings of each node and their homogeneity. This gives a good idea to the user about kind of host present in the cluster. Let's look at the resource pool section that Johnny talked about. As he mentioned, resource pool budgets can help optimize resource usage such that certain queries and tasks can perform with the best possible performance. Here, I would like to point out some useful links in the report that Johnny pointed out. Each card of a vAdvisor report is equipped to help the user independently understand how the data is acquired and how the recommendations are made. The short descriptions at the top shows what the card is about. The query button on the right shows what query was run to get the table information. An admin may choose to run this query directly on the database for further exploration. Moreover, the bottom of each card has a best practices section. This section points out to useful information along with links to Vertica knowledge articles. When I started, what I would do is go through each of the cards and then take a look at any recommendations that show up and try to figure out why they are recommended. This would give me more insight, and then I would read the best practices. For more clarity, I would click on some of these links to get more detailed information. Reading these sections makes it easy to understand Vertica, compare the results, and then take cognizant decisions. Let's go back to the Vertica configuration section. One of the most important cards in this section are the non-default config parameters. These are parameters that may have been temporarily altered either by the DB user or as a result of suggestions from support while handling a critical issue. Oftentimes, these are not reverted back to the original recommended values and can insidiously remain in the database, causing slowdowns and errors. To demonstrate what Johnny elaborated about config parameters, here is an example. For instance, the max merge out raw size is set to 5 GB versus a suggested minimum value of 10 GB. Having smaller merge out raw size may cause the merge out algorithm to skip large containers and may thus result in creating unnecessary number of ROS containers. While this is an example, each of these parameters can cause critical issues if they are improperly set. Let's look at some other sections. The schema design section shows various cards related to tables and metadata catalog. The metadata catalog helps quickly get up to speed with how this Vertica database is laid out. For example, just from this table, we can infer that there are 38 schemas, 755 tables, 179 of which are partitioned. Moreover, we can see the number of storage containers created per node, the compressed data size, and number of deleted records that currently exist in the database. Any outliers are easily recognizable. The report also uses a few charts to effectively display collected data. The table stats cards show the distribution of tables in the order of their sizes and in the order of their column count. While this only gives a summary of the table sizes, these can act as a good initial indicator to improve schema design. Moving on to projection design section. I do not want to venture into details, but mere looking at some of these cards can help identify what needs to be focused upon when understanding a Vertica database. The projection design section has cards that perform various checks on commonly seen issues such as tables with too many projections, unused projections, and skewed projections. This straight away gives out some hints about what we need to keep an eye out for when trying to optimize projections. Moving on. In database operations, request by query type and response per time by query type cards display historical data in the form of timeline charts that can help make informed decisions. This is another aspect of vAdvisor report that may have been otherwise tedious for a user to perform manually. These charts give a good idea about the queries, inserts, deletes, and loads that are being run on the DB over time. To summarize this informative report, let's see the recommendation section. The various sections providing different action items are compiled into a single recommendation section at the end. This section houses a consolidated version of the different recommendations as per Vertica best practices that a user should follow. I would use this section to look at recommendations directly and then trace them back to the corresponding cards for further exploration. At the end of this report, it is obvious how helpful and easy it is to educate a new user about their database within a few minutes. The process of having to go through system tables, writing and documenting queries, and comparing them to best practices is just outsourced to a single report. This is particularly useful for large clusters. Once comfortable with Vertica terminology, I decided to take up a challenge to see if I could really put what I had learned to use. The next step for me was to look at a report from a DB admin's perspective and identify some issues. Now imagine your friend Alice is a DB admin who is managing a database. She is well versed in Vertica, knows all the fine tunings, and has set up her organization's DB as per best practices. However, there are maybe multiple users using that database who could be chopping and changing stuff without any supervision. Performing periodic checks on all the variables, parameters, and features is not an easy task. Someone may make a change just for a test and then leave it in the database insidiously. Under such circumstances, if Alice has access to a vAdvisor report to her database, she could keep a close watch on all those elements and address any red flags. Here, I have picked a report from another database, let's call it database B, to demonstrate how it can help Alice, or any DB admin for that matter, to keep a check on their database. Since we already have a fair understanding of Vertica, we can quickly jump to the action items and determine any immediate recommendations. For example, on the homepage of this report, several cards have action items that require immediate attention. As a DB admin, Alice's first action would be to look at these action items, determine any critical errors or failures that could bring the database down. Secondly, she would need to determine if there are any recommendations that may help improve the performance of the database. Let's go through a few of them. For instance, the projections with data skew has an action item. Let's take a look. Looking at the recommendations column, it quickly points out the problem. In Vertica, query plans are generated by the optimizer such that a node can perform a specific task depending on the data required for the query. Data skew results in one node having to perform most of the task. Here, several of the projections have skew percent of more than 100, which can negatively affect performance. It is recommended to create new projections with segmentation clauses that can redistribute the data more evenly amongst the hosts. It is advised to use the column with high cardinality in the segmentation clause. And after new projections are created and refreshed, it is suggested that you draw projections with data skew. To simplify this, one can also use Vertica Database Designer to generate optimal projections. Since this is a Eon mode database, the Eon mode config is populated and has some action items. Let's look at the depot management card. Depot acts as a LRU cache to the communal storage. Every time a query accesses a certain data, it is fetched from the communal storage and stored in the depot. The least recently used data is then purged if the depot is full. Depot trashing occurs when the depot size is smaller than the frequently accessed data size, which causes the data to be repeatedly pulled from the communal storage. This report points to various files that were fetched 3 times in the past 7 days. There are various ways now that Alice can manage a depot to prevent depot trashing. The simplest one is setting a bigger depot size. The best practices section provides more info on the optimal size. We can also add specific policy or hints that add certain users or queries to prevent them from pulling any data into the depot. The recommendation also suggests another way, which is pinning a partition or table to the depot so that it doesn't refetch the data. Let's also look at some system resource usage data. In the CPU usage card, we can see that historical usage can quickly point to obvious bottlenecks in the host. For Eon mode clusters, we have separate tabs for each subcluster to segregate and analyze usage per subcluster. As we see for database B, the default subcluster is quite active versus a secondary subcluster. Moreover, some nodes such as node 2 in the default subcluster seem to have a CPU usage of more than 99%. This points Alice to the requirement of possibly upgrading her hosts or performing some database tuning to reduce excessive resource requirements. Unlike the previous report, storage container counts has a pending action for this report. In this card, several of the projections have ROS counts approaching the ROS pushback limit. This typically happens as Vertica segregates data per project partitions into different ROS containers. The user should, in this case, revisit their partition scheme. One of the new Vertica features available to the user in this regard is hierarchical partitioning. For instance, if the database has a table that is partitioned by day, we can only load close to 3 years of data before ROS pushback occurs. In such cases, if the user needs to load more than 3 years of data, hierarchical partitions are ideal. By specifying additional partition group by expressions in the DDL, partitions older than 6 months can be automatically merged by months. This way, large historical data can be loaded with a single statement. Now we saw that within a few minutes, we were able to identify and diagnose first states to several of the issues using a V-Advise report. Once comfortable, any user, be it a DB admin, a systems engineer, sales, or support, should easily be able to do this. Now we saw how this report helps a new user understand Vertica and a DB admin maintain it up to the best standards. We will look at another facet of V-Advisor. Consider a support engineer, Bob, who has just received a critical customer ticket. The customer recently made some changes to their Vertica cluster. The only information he got is that they brought down 2 non-adjacent nodes for some quick maintenance and the whole database went down. Now Bob knows that in Vertica, as long as 2 adjacent nodes are not down, that database should remain functional. Bob wants to resolve this issue quickly, so he comes to us for some help along with the V-Advisor report. Let us see if we can identify the issue and help him. This is the report for Bob's customers database. Let's call it C. From the home screen, we can see that case safety and node dependency require some attention. Let us see what is wrong. Case safety is a basic aspect for high availability of data. Vertica recommends a case safety of 1 such that each node has 2 copies of segmented data stored in its neighboring nodes. Having a case safety of 2 is acceptable, but redundant because it puts an extra 50% load on the system resources. When a Vertica cluster is scaled up or down, the data and the projections have to be altered, and the process that does it is rebalance. If rebalance is incomplete, it may leave some projections with dependencies that may not match with the projections that may have been remained after rebalancing. That may leave a specific nodes with more than 2 dependencies. In this case, several nodes have more than 2 dependencies. Typically, we expect the graph to be a ring with each circle having an edge to only 2 other nodes. A Vertica cluster remains up and fully functional if more than half the nodes in the database are up and no 2 adjacent nodes in the dependency ring are down. In this cluster, however, if node 1 and node 3 go down, then the DB goes down, which is precisely what the customer told Bob. To understand this better, we can just read the detailed information in the best practices section and also from the link to vertica.com. Here, detailed information about case safety and node dependency can be found. The user thus can get a much clearer idea about the topic and understand the database better. So Bob doesn't have to spend hours on a call with the customer to try and debug the issue. He can simply go back to the customer and explain the issue with some best practices and the solution. I hope the 3 case studies in this demo helped you understand how to traverse a vAdvisor report and also learn some new things about Vertica. As we mentioned, a vAdvisor report is not just a report for health checking, but a means of understanding a Vertica database for a new user and a way to identify and solve issues for a DB admin or a support engineer. And I personally would like to give full credit to vAdvisor for educating me enough to be able to give this demo. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our attendees for listening to our presentation. Now we're ready for Q&A. Okay, a lot of questions came in, so why don't we jump right in and answer as many as we can, guys. Let's go take a peek. All right, so the one with the most votes, how frequently uploads scrutinized to an S3 bucket? Who wants to take that one?
Hi, Jeff. I can take that.
Thanks, Ray. All right.
So yeah, so we expect customers to send us a scrutinize file at least once a month. Even if you think that everything is going well, it would still be beneficial to send us a scrutinized file every month and get an advisor report.
Very good. Okay. Thanks, Sri. Let's go to the next one. If we have questions about advisor report and recommendations, how could we get help from Vertica?
Hello. Yeah, I can take that. The best option would be to raise a support case, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And any recommendations are helpful. That helps us improve the product. So just set up a support case and just mention that it's about vAdvisor, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Great. Thanks, Naren. All right. Next one. If we have a query that would fit this report or idea, can we contribute to this report?
I can take this one. So basically, if you have a query that you like us to be part of the vAdvisor report, just open a case just as Narendra suggested earlier, and we'll take it from there. We'll evaluate it, and we'll take a look and see how we can fit this query into the report.
Great, Johnny. Thank you. All right, got another one. Does this report work for an Eon mode cluster?
Yeah, I can take that. So yes, it does. As we showed in the second report as well, that we have provisions where we can show specific statistics like cluster resource, system resource usage for Eon clusters and subclusters within an Eon cluster. So yes, it does.
Great. Okay, that's good news for that attendee. And the next one we got here is, can we generate the same report from Management Console instead of generating and uploading to Vertica?
Yeah, I can take that. Yes, we are working on putting some of these best practice checks into Management Console and generating a report. But there is a second part to this thing, as I said in my initial introduction. Our goal is to also collect data about how Vertica cluster is responding to different scenarios in the field. And that helps us really, figure out where we should actually invest our time and resources in improving the product. Not only that, but also being able to compare your current state of your cluster with your historical past, and also being able to compare that with the other customers that are having similar use case or a similar cluster, and what works and what does not work will help us really guide you into a better solution for your use case. So I believe that though we can definitely provide you a subset of this stuff in management console, we have a big picture thing to apply machine learning and really get to, like, future of where we can really help you improve your Vertica installation.
Great. So more to come there, potentially around machine learning. That's great, Srirang. All right. Next one. Once I upload Scrutinize to S3, how long will it take Vertica to send me the advisor report?
I can take that one. So basically, once you upload it to the S3 bucket, it will download it automatically, and a report will be generated. Actually, before you actually upload it to S3, if you provide the email address, your email address, once the report is downloaded and generated, it will all be automatically sent back to you.
Wow, that fast. Okay, good, Johnny. That's good news. All right, let's see what the next one is. Looks like one bumped up here. Did we cover this? Yeah, here it is. If my Scrutinize is more than 5 gigs, can I still use an S3 bucket?
Yeah, I can answer that. So yeah, you can use S3 bucket, but you will have to use the AWS CLI to upload it to S3 bucket. That's the only way you will be able to get it. The curl command will not work. So other option is to upload it to our SFTP site. But if you have AWS CLI, then it's very easy. Many of our customers send us Scrutinize that are bigger than 5 GB.
Got it. Okay, so no real issue with the size there. That's good. Okay, does the report also suggest on changing some configuration parameter based on the workload to a non-default value?
I can take
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So so as of now, we have more of the other way around, basically suggesting if something has gone wrong and then what is the default value. But that is a pretty good feedback, I think, that we could think about. Having the other way around, where we could look at the workload and then suggest some non-default parameters. And I think that would be something that we are also looking at in the future, to add such capabilities that we mentioned using predictive analytics. And so yeah, so look out for that in the future, I guess.
Great, more futures, more advancements with this. This is great. Okay, can we clarify the last example of Bob where cluster went down? Case safety was 1. Want to see how it went down, how it can be fixed. Looks like a use case question there.
Yeah, I can answer that. So the first thing, when the cluster goes down, is to really understand why it went down. And the advisor report helped us figure out why it went down. That there were nodes that had dependency to not just 2 nodes, but more than 2 nodes. Now, when you have dependency to more than 2 nodes, which basically tells you that, if you bring the 2 nodes that have dependency between them, and if right, of different reasons. One of the reasons is the rebalance that you ran after adding a node could have not been completed, and so one of the option to do is to run your select rebalance and make sure that the rebalance is complete. Sometimes what happens is there could be a flaw somewhere that where the internal dependency map is having an issue, and you could run a recompute node dependency to basically this map. But if that is not, sometimes it's not possible today, but in the past, historically, customers have created some projections with a different body, like, generally the offset 0 and offset 1. Sometime a customer may create offset 0 and offset 2, and that could be one other reason. So yeah, so there are many reasons. Our goal is to try to give you as much information as possible to fix the problems too. In some cases we may not be there at this point, but our goal is to not just give you what's wrong, but solutions. Some of those are already in the report, but we may be lacking few.
Very good. More improvements on the way. Got a quick one here. Which browsers are supported? Last time there may have been some issues with Safari.
Yeah. Yeah, I can quickly answer that. So generally, when we develop this tool, we test with Chrome and Firefox. So I would recommend and suggest using one of those two. But that's a good point actually, because we never got around to probably testing with Safari, and yeah, we can take a look into that.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Naren. All right. Another one with around database designer. Does the schema design section replace DBD?
I can help with that. At this point, it's not the schema design section does not replace the DBD at all. The DBD, you will use it separately from the schema design. From the vAdvisor. The vAdvisor schema design basically just shows you information about your schema, basically. The DBD actually will help you create projections based on your queries that can optimize your query.
All right. Good stuff, Johnny. Thank you. All right. We're coming up at the end of the session here. There was a note, and I'm going to read it if you attendees can't see it. You can also always reach out to your Vertica Customer Success Manager if you need assistance with your vAdvisor report. We're always happy to help you and get connected if not able to help directly. So I would recommend everyone on the line to definitely take advantage of this, of the resources of this team. A lot of experience here with Vertica. But that takes us to the end here. There were some more questions. We can answer those offline, but I do want to thank all of our attendees for the participation, all the questions that they brought. Again, if we're unable to answer your question today, we'll do our best to respond directly via email. And again, our engineers will be in the developer lounge right after the session, so make sure you attend the developer lounge. And please note that a replay of today's event and a PDF copy of the slides will be available on demand shortly. And of course, we invite you to share them with your colleagues. Again, thank you to our audience today. Don't forget to type the session code, this is the last one of the day, into the Analyze to Win section on the event navigation panel. Now, this concludes this breakout session. Have a great day. Really hope you enjoyed Vertica 21. Thank you, everyone.